Hi everyone, my name is Alaina and this is your Belmont Math and Science Center tutor tip. Today I'm just going to talk about some types of chemical bonds including covalent, ionic, and hydrogen. So before we learn about the different types of bonds, first let's go over what a bond is. A chemical bond is a lasting attraction between atoms that enables the formation of chemical compounds. The nature of the bond between the atoms is related to the distance between them and then just how positive or negative they are. So why do atoms bond? They work to reduce their overall energy, and they do this by achieving a balance between the attractive and repulsive forces. So when two atoms approach each other, the electrons of each are attracted to the protons of the other. This is known as electrostatic force. Essentially, like charges repel and opposites attract. Some definitions just to keep in mind would be bond length, which is the distance between two nuclei at the point of minimum energy. Essentially, this is where the attractive and repulsive forces can cancel each other out. Electronegativity is the ability of an atom to attract shared electrons. And then polarity is the separation of charges, just how positive or negative they are. The first bond we're going to talk about is covalent bonds. So this is a bond formed by atoms sharing electrons, and they're generally done between nonmetals and sometimes metalloids because most of those hold their own electrons so tightly that they are more likely to share them with another atom than they are to gain or lose them altogether. Not all sharing is equal between the bond, so it has to do with the difference in electronegativities. Electrons are more attracted to molecules with higher electronegativities. So if there is a greater electronegative difference, this causes a shift in the electrons, causing one side to be more negative than the other. This is known as a polar covalent bond, which is just a covalent bond in which two atoms have different electronegativities, causing a separation of charges. But if two atoms have the identical or very similar electronegativity, the charges are distributed evenly, meaning one atom is not taking more electrons than the other. So we call this a nonpolar covalent bond. Some examples you see here, the polar covalent bonds so they have electrons that are more attracted to the more electronegative atom, which they actually have written on here. So the little S symbol with the negative sign means there are more electronegativity. So in this case, the chlorine, the oxygen, and the nitrogen are all stronger than hydrogen. So there's going to be a polarity difference within the molecule. And then if you look at the nonpolar covalent bond examples, these all have the same or similar electronegativities, so their electrons are shared evenly, so there is no polarity difference. Now we're going to talk about ionic bonds. So metals, unlike nonmetals, loosely hold on to their outer electron shells, so they're constantly dropping electrons and becoming positive ions. And when positive ions come across a negative ion, they attract each other, so they bond. This type of bond is called an ionic bond, which is formed between a positive ion and a negative ion. Because the ions are formed when one atom loses electrons and the other gains the electrons, we often say the ionic bonds are formed by transfer of electrons from one atom to the other. They do not share electrons. These generally occur between a metal and a nonmetal. If you look at these examples, each one is a bond between a metal and a nonmetal, being one is positive and one is negative. And if you follow the color-coordinated electrons on the right-hand side, in every example, an electron from the positive ion, the little gray dots, moves to the negative ion's outer circle. This is because the negative ion steals that electron. And the last one we're going to talk about is hydrogen bonds. So hydrogen bonds are created from an attraction between molecules, generally between a hydrogen to a nitrogen, oxygen, or fluoride. If you look on the screen, the hydrogen bond is the area right here, which is between the hydrogen of one molecule and the oxygen of the other. The bonds inside of the molecules are polar bonds. So hydrogen bond is between the molecules. Polar bonds are within one molecule. And on this slide, it just shows you some more examples of hydrogen bonds. Every single place you see a red dotted line, that is an example of a hydrogen bond. I hope this was helpful, but if you have any questions, consult your professor or visit us in the Math and Science Center.